Okay, here we go. Welcome to another chapter of, okay, I guess we could call this the skirmish line, but uh, okay, that'll work. Today I want to talk about ethics and morality in gaming. Yeah, okay. And exactly what does that mean? What does that mean to me as a game master, player? How does that work? Let me start by saying that a few weeks ago I published a post on my Stately Fry Manor blog talking about the upcoming Dark Dungeons movie. This is a movie that's based on a religious tract from a screaming, foaming at the mouth bigot named Jack Chick, who, according to him, everybody is going to hell. He's sort of like Westboro Baptist Church. Yeah, except he's really into publishing these little tracts. Well, during the 1980s, when we had the Satanic Panic and the whole bothered about Dungeons and Dragons anti-RPG movement, which, by the way, went nowhere, obviously, uh, he published one called Dark Dungeons, which supposedly warned of the dangers of playing D&D. Wow. Yeah, I wasn't aware that my soul was in danger by playing D&D. But hey, you live and learn. Anyway, it was a really cheesy. I mean, come on. According to that pamphlet, the dungeon master teaches one of the players how to cast a spell on their parents so they can control them. So they can get them to buy them all these D&D books. Really? I mean, come on. If I'm a college kid, I can cast a control spell on my parents for real? I didn't have them buy me any D&D books, folks. I'm going for the big ticket items. How about a brand new car and maybe a really nice apartment? And y'all can just pay for that because I'm controlling you. Anyway, it was almost ludicrously funny. Well, now there is a movie coming out called Dark Dungeons. That's right, it's a movie based on this idiot tract. By the way, D&D players aren't the only people Jack Chick is consigned to hell. If you really follow his tracks, most everybody on this planet's going to hell. But hey, it's a loving God. Well, we'll deal with that later. As a response to this, excuse me, still getting over a cold. As a response to this, Tracy Hickman is actually very well known in RPG industry circles. I've read his stuff. Great writer, love his work, and a genuinely nice human being. Tracy made a very interesting statement. He didn't think that D&D was immoral. It wasn't moral enough. I'll let that sink in for a minute. You see, Tracy is a devout Mormon. It says right on his website he's not the least bit shy about, proclaiming his faith. He's a good man, a good person. He and his wife both are decent and wonderful folks. And they surely write some very good stuff. However, Tracy has the notion that the role-playing game scenarios should be used to teach moral values. In other words, you proselytize. I mean, really. We should have wholesome entertainment. Things like that. And that's fine if that's how he wants to do it. If he and his players enjoy this, wow, more power to them. However, also be reminded that in 2002, Wizards of the Coast brought out something called the Book of Vile Darkness for D&D, which I always found remarkably funny because its initials were BVD, which is an old brand of men's underwear. I don't know why, that just kind of popped up in my head. Anyway, he fired off a screed in his newsletter that just basically called it D20 terrorism, which I kind of sat there and I thought, really, Tracy, just take a deep breath. He's comparing the game designers and writers to Al Qaeda? Really? It was overwrought, overdramatic, and really put me and a lot of people off to whatever point he was trying to make. And yet, I could understand his sense of outrage. I felt it myself. There have been some rather questionable gaming materials that I felt a sense of, but on the other hand, I don't really equate those people to terrorists. Well, come to think of it, there is actually a game out there called Rahowa, Racial Holy War. That's right, it's an RPG about white supremacists in a post-Holocaust setting running around killing inferiors. Yeah, that's kind of suckitude. But whatever, end of statement. So, as much as I really like and respect Tracy and his wife Laura for the good work they've done, and they've done a lot of it, I really tend not to kind of feel that way about games, because to me it's ultimately only a game. It's something I do for fun. When I'm not, coughing my lungs out. Anyway, the point is, there's been a lot of talk lately. Morality, ethics in gaming. There's some term floating around called wrong, bad, fun. Things like that. So I kind of like to give my take on it. And I break it down into two basic categories. The first one, in terms of morality, is how you deal with your fellow human beings. You, say, as game master or a player, how do you deal with the people sitting around that table as people? And I've always found that the golden rule works wonders. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat other people as you'd like to be treated. Treat other players like you'd like to be treated. Now, this is not, we could have different, just treat them well. Treat them, be accepting, be inclusive. You're all there to have a good time. You're all there to take part in what I think is the greatest damn hobby around. Gaming. Sit back and enjoy it. The second part is the game itself, and that can even be broken down into two separate parts. The first one is the world itself. That's for game masters. That is the world itself. The world that you create and present to your players. What sort of morality does it have? What sort of ethics are there? Are there, do these communities have ethics? Let's say you're doing a Celtic background style adventure world, and you have the Celtic communities. This Celtic community, what sort of ethics do they have? Really, what are the conventions? What drives them? It kind of gives the players a sense of, yeah, this is, you know, what my character grew up doing. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it, but it's there. You look, for example, at uh, Cubicle 7's Lord of the Rings, The One Ring. What a fantastic game. And it evokes that spirit in Tolkien, that sense of, I'm not sure quite how to, sense of honor, of high fantasy. Does a very good job of that. That is the world. You know, that is the world. And excuse me again. And, you know, your character can react to it any way that they want. Now I'll give you an example of something I did a number of years ago. I set up police investigation, police procedural, and there were 4 players, and basically it was 1938 in Munich, Germany, and guess what? They were the Reich Security Police, the SIPO, which was the criminal police, the Gestapo, the Secretendienst, and a couple of other Nazi. In short, folks, they were not just Nazis, they were Nazi policemen. And they were investigating an occult, a murder, a double murder, actually, that was meant to look like a murder-suicide. And we had a creepo officer, he was the senior investigator, who was basically the good cop. His partner, Gestapo, all the way. He was basically, as the guy playing him once described him, one of the most educated thugs you'll ever run into. And a member of the Secretendienst, which was the SS security service. Yeah, they were a barrel of laughs. And I think the other one was from the General Allgemeine SS. Anyway, they investigated, they were Nazi. And you may say, oh my God. But I did this for a couple of reasons. First of all, I thought, well, there's a friend of mine who herself identifies as Jewish, said, wow, Frank, what incredibly delicious irony. They're investigating a double murder for a government of murderers. She thought it was really striking. I put a lot of time into researching the background. You know, I learned more about how the Nazi police state worked than I'd ever known before. And it's pretty terrifying in a way. But the idea was they were, in effect, the good guys. And they actually succeeded. They tracked the guy down, him and his 2 henchmen. There was a nasty little firefight. And the 2 henchmen were killed, but the guy was arrested. And typical, next thing you know, a couple of days after they bring the dude in, he turns out he's an old Nazi battler, you know, the Autokampfer from the Freikorps days, old battler from the Freikorps days. They get a summons, and they find themselves talking to SS Sturmbannführer Walter Schellenberger, who was head of Gestapo counterintelligence, who basically told them this whole thing never happened. And he wanted to make sure they understood this whole thing never happened. Trust me, if Walter Schellenberger told you the whole thing never happened, it never happened. But they thought it was interesting and, you know, not unexpected. The point is, these people were acting in the name of one of the most horrendous regimes on earth. This was, you know, you take a look at, you study the history. Hell, you go to places like Dachau, you walk that ground, you realize evil took place here. The point is, they responded as players, they enjoyed it, but I made sure they understood where this was going, who they were supposed to be. But being the adult players, and these are good players, they took the challenge. Okay, well, enough of that, per se. That's the world. The world was Nazi Germany. It doesn't get any more lawful than that. You run games in the Dark Ages. One of my favorite games to run is Call of Cthulhu. Wow, yeah. And that offers itself a whole new set of very interesting possibilities in terms of exploring morality, exploring the nature of evil, or just having a good time playing in the 1920s, which, by the way, when I run a historical period like for Call of Cthulhu, I run it racism and all. I think in one game I had an NPC I was playing, and I looked at one of the guys who was at the table who was a black guy, African-American, playing an African-American, and he was in 1923 Arkansas. And the NPC, who was a sheriff, just looked at him, and he was the white sheriff of this little town, and says, "Boy, you best be getting your nigger ass out of here." And some people are like, "Oh my God, how could you say that?" Because that's exactly how they would talk. It is ugly. That's the way it was. Was I wrong in doing that? I don't think so. Because it reinforced that there were other evils around other than the Cthulhu mythos, let me tell you. Anyway, yeah, sorry about that. So, and you construct your world, you construct your scenario. It's up to you to decide what moral forces are out there, but there is one that I always believe is going to be something of a universal constant, at least for me. Actions have consequences. You want to run around with your, well, another example, the when you hit about the 5th or 6th level in level-based games like D&D, you think you're a real badass because you're like, hell, I'm 6th level. You have the player that runs around with the 6th level fighter badass, basically being a bully, screwing people around, grabbing the little, tavern wench, and basically bending her over the bar just to show he could do it. Well, he did this once too often, and the next morning he said, "Okay, well, I get up." I said, "Well, roll up a new character." "What?" "Yeah, this guy's dead. He got his throat cut." "He's had enough of your crap. She cut your throat while you were asleep, stole your money, and she's gone." Wow. But that's what happens. I also wanted to kind of reinforce that we don't tolerate that kind of behavior. The other kind of behavior that really honks me off is the great classic. The party member that's got to screw around with the other players. Pull this kind of steal stuff from them. "Well, my character's a thief." Fine. What can you thieve when we cut your hands off? Whatever you do to people outside the party, that's up to you. And even then, if you get caught, too bad. But I will not tolerate that in a party, in a game I'm running. It can get difficult and dangerous enough. And it's at times difficult to keep all these wonderful personalities sitting around the table, kind of, on friendly terms, because that's what really makes everything go round. Anyway, I guess that's it. That's really what I look for. I guess to sum it all up, make sure that, first of all, treat everybody else around that table the way you would like to be treated yourself. Okay? Don't talk over them. Don't, shove them to one side. Don't sit there and go, oh, your character sucks, any of this other stuff. Why would you want to do that? Are you really that pathetic a human being? Oh, well. That always works. And it works. It keeps the party together, and it helps forge a sense of community around the table, which is, to me, very important. The next point is when you create a world, or you run a module for that matter, when you gen up that adventure, what's the underlying ethics system or customs of the society they're moving in? Of course, if they're out in the middle of the wilderness, even then, you'll still find it. These certain behaviors. Yeah. And finally, don't screw with the other player characters. Don't. The little joke is one thing, but I have seen some horrendous abuses of this, which has basically driven people away from the gaming table, and in at least one instance, probably pretty much drove them out of gaming. We don't need that. And remember, actions have consequences. Keep that in mind. And go out there, have fun, play games. Talk to you later.